Well, hello, friends. So, today I am joining you to talk about the nervous system and insecure attachment. I'm disorganized. I was disorganized. I believe I've healed that actually. I think one of the ways, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, attachment styles is basically how we were cared for as little ones. And this can start even in utero up to, some people say, up to 7 years. I tend to think that your attachment style can be imprinted and affected at any time. Now, the established sort of what sets the tone for your attachment, how you attach to a caregiver, is those early formative childhood years. Mostly. So basically it's your attachment to a caregiver as a little one and how that affects your relationships, all relationships as an adult or moving forward. So it is my experience. So I had disorganized, leaning, anxious attachment. As I reflect back on my life and even my early relationships, like in high school and college, I had some of these patterns already. However, I had a big trauma happen to me when I was around 21, a death. And then I had another thing happen to me when I was around between the ages 17 to 25. And I think both of those things impacted my attachment and my relationships, because one of them was a massive betrayal wound that happened to me. And from that point, I think that really affected my relationships moving forward, my romantic relationships, and even my friendships. So anxious attachment has been said to be the outcome of abandonment. So if you take a little one, and we do like the cry it out method, by the way, this is not for any parent to feel badly about the decisions that they made and about the things that they did as a parent. We only know what we know at the time. And we are here to learn and educate ourselves and be better, So it can be really, really hard for us parents to hear some stuff. When I was first learning about all this stuff and figuring out how many mistakes I made as a parent, it is really difficult. And so I want to honor that and validate any of you who might have a hard time hearing some of this. Just know you're not alone, and you are certainly valid for feeling how you feel. And also, this is an opportunity for us to learn and do things better, right? Moving forward. So as a new mother, I also did the cry it out method. I am certain I know that was done to me. And that can actually start to form this abandonment wound that nobody's taking care of you and nobody's coming. It's when we are little like that and we are not actually capable of caring for our basic needs. When we are crying and needing help, that's a bit of a fight or flight response. Hey, I'm needing help. I need something. And when the caregiver doesn't come to soothe and to take care, right? So a little one has to have co-regulation with a caregiver to regulate their nervous system. They have to have that. They can't regulate their own nervous systems. It's not actually biologically online for them yet. So a lot of people don't understand this. That part of their little brain is still developing. It doesn't understand how to soothe itself. It has to have the attachment of a proper caregiver to help to do that. So when we Cry it out is just kind of one of those things that a lot of people are still doing. It certainly was something that my parents did in that generation. I think that's kind of when it started. And so it's kind of the best way to describe how that abandonment stuff starts early on. But what happens is let's say, okay, so you're even a little bit older. So for anxious attachment, there's 3 different types of attachment: anxious attachment, avoidant, and disorganized. So for anxious, it's an abandonment wound. In anxious attached people, as an adult, it can look like you're always anxious in a relationship. You get anxious when the person leaves. You need to hear from the person a lot. You need to get responses from texts quickly. You never really feel settled. You're always kind of like, are they here? You're kind of waiting for the ball to drop a little bit. And that means that your caregiver was kind of there sometimes and not there sometimes, right? So there was no you couldn't depend that they were always going to be there. So I should say those 3 things are insecure attachment styles. What we want is secure. I didn't mention that. So secure attachment is that the caregiver was always there. They, for the most part, right? Now, I don't think that these patterns are going to form for the one-off thing that happens and somebody wasn't there to hold you, or something happened and they couldn't get to you right away, right? These are, consistent patterns that happened over time and developed. So for anxious attached kids and little ones, the caregiver would show up sometimes and not show up other times. So the child, the little one, is left like anxiously kind of like, are they going to be here? Are they not going to be here? Like, right? And so that's what kind of develops in the relationships later on. I have even had some anxious attachment to friends, not in a codependent type of way. That's actually slightly different. But more like I didn't always need my friends, but more like if someone didn't call me back or respond maybe to a text, I would like assume the worst. They were offended by something I said. Something happened, something there. So there was always a part of me that was like, there was always a part of my nervous system. I want to always be bringing this back to the nervous system because I want you guys to understand that all 3 of those disorganized attached styles, I keep saying disorganized, insecure attached styles, are nervous system dysregulation, okay? It's nervous system dysregulation that happened early in childhood and developed over time, and the nervous system never got settled, right? So when we have that anxiousness, we are always kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. We're always kind of waiting to be abandoned in some way, right? There's a little bit of rejection, but rejection more is for the avoidant. So we'll talk about that. Avoidant attached people is people whose parents, when they were little ones, consistently did not show up. So in anxious, they showed up sometimes, not all the times. When a caregiver consistently doesn't show up, let's say you consistently weren't picked up, right? You were left as a little one to play in your room. Your parents were so, let's say, dysregulated, maybe, that contact, consistently, that was absent. The connection was absent, right? Whereas anxious, it's there, it's not there. It's like, it's not consistent. But with avoidant, it's consistently not there. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so these people grow up to be in relationships where they are scared of connection. That's how it appears. I think they actually really want connection, but they're terrified of it because they say avoidant attached people, it's a fear of rejection. So they reject first almost. Disorganized is a fear of betrayal. That is when actually betrayal and abuse of some sort happened, like serious neglect, potentially some harm, physical harm, any kind of actual abuse taking place. And I think, for myself, I grew up in a seemingly great family, like loving parents and all of that. However, there was inconsistency, and both of my parents had dysregulation in their own nervous systems. When I craved attention from boyfriends and from boys, like when I was in middle school and high school. I did have a great boyfriend actually in high school. I feel like in that relationship, it's interesting because I do think that in certain relationships, attachment styles can show up differently depending on how that person is. But I also think you attract what you're ready for, right? So when I had this betrayal happen to me later in my teenage years, early 20s, that's when my disorganized really came online in a big way. However, I did have some early childhood stuff that would have also been disorganized, led to some disorganized stuff. So it's a fear of betrayal, and you're kind of go through relationships in this paranoid state. Actually, the description that I gave you guys a minute ago about how I would kind of be with friends, if they didn't text back, or if something, or if I didn't hear from them, or if I didn't constantly get sort of validation in the relationship, I would kind of assume maybe they were talking about me, or that they didn't. I never really assumed people liked me or loved me. I would kind of always assume that they didn't, and I had to be a certain way in order to prove myself. This is, again, I want to bring this all back to trauma patterns, stored old survival stress patterns, nervous system dysregulation, right? What happens is, so we form these patterns, we start to see these things play out in our relationships. As we heal our nervous system, what is incredible is our relationships start to really change. And what's happened for me is I don't just assume people don't like me anymore, I actually had a nickname. My friends in New York used to call me Perry, because they'd be like, "You're so paranoid." They would tease me about it. And because I was always thinking, this is a trauma response for sure, when you always think people are against you or talking about you. And I remember people saying, it's not always about you. When people are really traumatized, they do think things are kind of always about them, but it's not in a selfish way. I think it gets misconstrued, the person gets misconstrued as being self-centered, or you always think everything's about you. No, we think that there is an attack on us constantly. So we're always in that survival stress, you guys. That's what it is. It's survival stress, because it's you're waiting. You're waiting for the attack, right? And so it's interesting because, this can develop, a lot of personality patterns can stem from this too, right? Attention deficit, even, because you're kind of always scattered. If you think about that underlying sort of fight or flight stuff and that anxiousness, right? ADD is you're just busying yourself because you've got all that disorganized, dysregulated energy, fight or flight energy that's going on in the system, and you're having to distract because being with yourself is so incredibly uncomfortable, because that all you feel is that activation, right? When we start to work with the nervous system directly, everything changes. And certainly my relationships have changed dramatically. And my relationship, obviously, with myself has changed dramatically, and the way that I parent has changed. But one of the biggest points that I wanted to make, I had to kind of set that up and give you guys a little bit of background on that. But really the big point that I wanted to make in this video is you can find your root cause for many symptoms by looking at how you are in relationships and how your system is in response to relationships. So a lot of people, I talk about this a lot of people are changing diet, doing all these things for their health to heal their autoimmune without looking at this nervous system piece, because everybody has resistance to it, because it is the one thing that makes you actually look at yourself in this very deep way and be with these sensations in the body in a very different way and more direct way. And that can feel extremely scary to a lot of people. But when I realized, so something very pivotal happened in my journey. When I was trying to heal from lupus, I realized I was getting flares. I had healed a lot, and I wasn't actually getting flares very often anymore. And that was because of everything else that I was doing, which were great. But I was still having flares. Right when I would not have flares for like a chunk of time, then it would come. But what I realized was it was always around a relationship thing. Either I got my heart broken, or something happened with a friend even. Something that would rock my system so much. And that's actually when I started, before I even got into nervous system stuff, I started getting into attachment styles and learning about how all these attachment stuff, that's what led me to nervous system stuff. And it's a really big piece. So if you find that you have flares around tough conversations you have with loved ones that trigger an abandonment wound within you, right? If you find that you have flares around if you have a tumultuous relationship, if you feel like you have these autoimmune symptoms and you have relationship issues, like there's not consistent connection with a partner, or you're choosing maybe the wrong partners consistently, or you always find yourself in tumultuous relationships and you think that the two things are not related, I want to challenge that and say that they are both nervous system, early childhood stored survival stress related. Of course, I do not make claims because I don't know each and every person, and every person is different. But what I will say, and the only claim that I can make, is with my own life. For a long time, I thought that those two things, even though I understood the whole body, I understood that piece. I understood I'm dealing with mind, body, soul, right? Like I got that, but I didn't get how it was all connected. And it is all connected through our early childhood survival stress patterns and our nervous system. That is how they're connected. They are connected, our biological physical symptoms, our emotional symptoms, our stored survival stress and patterns from early childhood and dysregulation. Our dysregulated nervous system is connected to our physiology, our biology, how we sleep, how we eat, how we digest our food, our hormone production. It is all connected through that autonomic nervous system. And, for me, a big part of my healing happened when I realized that piece. Like, oh my God, I am so anxious in relationship. I actually haven't had a healthy relationship in like a very long time. And I realized that was playing out in my parenting. And I realized that some of the things that led me to have anxious/disorganized attachment, not the thing that happened to me later in life and when I was a teenager and early adult, but the earlier stuff, I was doing those same type patterns to my little ones. And I, of course, did not want to have them be burdened with these attachment, insecure attachment styles. And so what's amazing is our little ones can heal really fast. You can heal. And I hope that this information was useful to you. I like to keep these videos around 20 minutes. There's always, obviously, a million things I could say about this topic. But the main thing that I wanted to say is, it's interesting, the patterns, when we look at our physical symptoms and our emotional symptoms and we start to see how they are connected. It's very, very interesting. So pay attention if you have a big fight with somebody and it triggers something in you and you are learning to feel your body in a different way. And you go, oh, this feeling, it feels like, it's so interesting. Okay, here's when I really started to get it. When I understood that a breakup actually hurt my body, like physically hurt my body. I was so much chronic fatigue, so much couldn't function when I would go through a big breakup or whatever, or I had been, abandoned like in some way, right? So when I realized this is a direct connection to my physical symptoms. And what is it that I'm actually feeling? Oh, this is that abandonment piece. This is what I felt when I was X years old and, whatever happened. Or this is what I felt in my body as a baby when nobody would come and I was hungry or whatever it is, And it's an actual sensation that takes place in the body. And what's interesting is someone who has really secure attachment to their caregiver when they're young, and they have really supportive, connected, regulated parent systems, which I have to say, sadly, I don't know many people who have that, but they do exist. I have met them. There's a spectrum to everything, right? So people who have way more connection to a caregiver growing up, and their dads were around and their dads didn't do all that tough love and all this. They were actually really nurturing and connected and but also very protective in that sort of beautiful masculine energy way. Moms were there, nurturing, supportive. They picked them up when they cried. They fed them when they were hungry. All of the things were on board, and the parents were both very regulated and in healthy relationship with each other. Those people, if they experience a breakup later in life, they do not have the same actual physical pain take place in their body as someone else like me, maybe, who has these chronic symptoms that stem from this emotional pain. And that's because of that early stuff. And so anyway, very interesting topic. And I definitely recommend everyone tune into how they are in relationship, how these patterns have consistently showed up in their relationships, and how they are connected to the physical body and your physical symptoms, and see if you can identify where the pain is when you have an emotional thing hit you. Where is the physical pain? Can you identify the physical pain, and can you say, this is abandonment? this is rejection. This is betrayal. I'm going to my heart because a lot of times we feel it in the chest, right? Right at that heart, right? So if we think about that heart chakra. Now we also can feel it in the throat. If we felt like we didn't have a voice to speak up in relationship, we can feel it in the solar plexus. That's the seat of our power, right? If we don't have a big sense of self, if we do have a lot of codependency stuff going on, which does show up with anxious attachment a lot, and so that can be a lot in the solar plexus. So if you have those sort of like belly issues and things like that, trouble with digestion, again, it still does all go back to the nervous system, but these connections are really important to make as we're healing. Really, really, really important. So, okay, I'm going to sign off, but you will hear more on this topic down the road. I hope you guys are very well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.